At the peak of our marital journey, my husband Jason and I, lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment on the first floor of a brick building. This building was a man's acquisition, and I knew nothing about the previous tenants except that a lonely old man lived here. Later, thanks to our friendly neighbors, sweet and talkative grandmothers, I learned part of the story about our dwelling. The previous owner was a real alcoholic and turned the house into a drinking den. After he left, relatives quickly disposed of the apartment for little money in an effort to avoid association with this unpleasant place. My husband, then future spouse, hired a renovation crew to make the apartment look decent. When I first moved into the apartment after the renovation, I never would have imagined what had gone on here before if I hadn't been told this story. I didn't like living there. The windows faced north, there were mice on the first floor, and insects crawling out of the basement. Jason consoled me by telling me that we'd bought the place to sell and that we just had to be patient. The days passed. The year passed. In the spring, I wanted to send the rug from the large bedroom to be cleaned. Not waiting for Jason to come home from work, I decided I could handle it myself. When I rolled the rug halfway up, I found the floorboards underneath it burned, as if someone had built a fire here. It struck me, and I touched the charred wood. Ashes remained on my fingers. I struggled to wash it off, as if the ash didn't want to leave me so easily. Jason said he knew about the problem with the burning floor, but what exactly happened, he doesn't know. He advised me not to dwell on it, but after this strange incident, even more mysterious things started happening. There were dirty foot or fingerprints in the bathroom from time to time. I would silently clean up the dirt, assuming it was from my husband. But one day I found a footprint that was smaller than the man's, but larger than mine. Something unpleasant possessed me at that moment. I scrutinized the footprint for the first time. My fingers touched the ashes. It was strange and incomprehensible, but even then I didn't connect it to the burned boards in the bedroom. One warm summer afternoon I was sitting in the yard in the gazebo. My third-floor neighbor, Mrs. Robinson, came over. Before that, we had just said hello to each other. "Decided to get some fresh air?" she asked, looking at me curiously. "Yeah, it's stuffy in the house, but it's nice here," I replied, and we began to have a conversation. We started chatting and I shared with her the story of the burning floor in the apartment. Mrs. Robinson raised her eyebrows. "There was a dysfunctional couple living in your apartment, Willie and Laura. They drank non-stop. When their son went to jail for murder, they only compounded their problems. Their lights and water were cut off, so they made a fire in their room to cook and keep warm. One day, when Willie left the house, Laura, drunk, fell asleep by the stove. The firemen quickly put out the fire, but Laura was badly burned. She died as she fell asleep lying dead by the stove." Mrs. Robinson froze, looking at me, waiting for my reaction. I didn't know. I whispered and realized whose footprints were showing up in the bathroom. Honestly, after that story, I was scared to be at home. Jason admitted that he knew about the fire but didn't want to scare me. I went to church and lit a candle for Laura's repose. After that, there were no more footprints in the bathroom. 3 years later, we sold that horrible apartment and moved into the house where we still live today.